When considering the defining battles of the American Civil War, iconic sites like Gettysburg and Shiloh often surface as emblematic of the brutal struggle between the Union forces and the secessionist Confederate armies. These battlefields have become sacred symbols of a conflict that tore the fledgling United States apart and reshaped the nation's destiny. Yet the scope of the war, which erupted when Confederate artillery opened fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor in April 1861, extended far beyond a few famed engagements. Over the course of 4 relentless years, Union and Confederate forces clashed in over 10,000 military engagements across a vast geographical expanse, from the Rocky Hills of Vermont to the deserts of Arizona. These confrontations ranged from skirmishes involving a few hundred men to colossal battles in which entire armies, numbering in the tens of thousands, fought for control of cities, rivers, railways, and strategic high ground. The human toll was staggering. According to records compiled by the National Park Service, roughly 110,100 Union soldiers were killed in combat, with an additional 275,174 wounded. On the Confederate side, an estimated 94,000 perished in battle, and 194,026 sustained injuries. Beyond these battlefield losses, countless others succumbed to disease, malnutrition, exposure, and accidents, bringing the total death toll, by some estimates, to as many as 850,000, as suggested by a 2011 demographic study. The war remains the deadliest in American history. Determining which battles had the greatest impact is a complex task. Judging the significance of a battle is rarely straightforward, notes Jim Campy, a representative of the American Battlefield Trust, an organization committed to protecting historic combat sites and educating the public on their importance. A battle's influence should be measured by how it shaped the broader war effort. Did it prolong the conflict or hasten its resolution? Did it accomplish a strategic aim, crush a critical enemy force, or allow one side to gain a vital advantage elsewhere? Among the thousands of engagements, the following 7 battles proved particularly consequential in shaping the course and the ultimate outcome of the Civil War. First Bull Run, Manassas, July 21, 1861. In the first major clash of the war, Union General Irvin McDowell led a force of mostly green, 90-day volunteers out of Washington, D.C., with the ambitious objective of capturing Richmond, the Confederate capital, and swiftly ending the rebellion. Opposing him was Confederate General Pierre G.T. Beauregard, who had entrenched his forces at a critical railway junction near Manassas, Virginia. The battle began with initial Union success, as they pushed back the Confederate line. However, the tide turned when reinforcements arrived under Brigadier General Thomas J. Jackson. Jackson's unyielding stand earned him the enduring nickname, Stonewall. The forces of the Union crumbled in disarray, their ranks dissolving into a chaotic retreat toward the capital, their morale battered by the ferocity of the engagement. The toll was staggering. 2,896 soldiers were either slain, wounded, unaccounted for, or taken prisoner, a grim tally that underscored the battle's brutality. In contrast, the Confederate Army, though battered, sustained 1,982 casualties, a heavy but comparatively lighter burden. This sobering defeat shattered the North's naive hopes of a swift and decisive victory, dispelling any lingering illusions that the conflict could be resolved with a single, glorious campaign. For both the Union and the Confederacy, the outcome served as a grim harbinger, foretelling a prolonged and tortuous struggle that would test the resolve of both nations. The fields, stained with the blood of the fallen, stood as a stark testament to the war's unrelenting cost, while the cries of the wounded echoed through the night, a haunting reminder of the sacrifices demanded by a divided nation's clash. Neither side could ignore the weight of this moment. It marked the beginning of a grueling odyssey, one that would forge heroes, break spirits, and reshape the destiny of a fractured land. Fort Donelson, February 11–16, 1862. One of the early strategic victories for the Union came with the siege and capture of Fort Donelson in northern Tennessee. Commanded by Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant, Union forces launched an assault along the Cumberland River. Although Confederate defenders initially repelled Union gunboats and mounted a vigorous counterattack to break out, they ultimately faltered, retreating to their fortifications and forfeiting momentum. Seizing the opportunity, Grant exploited a weakness in the Confederate defenses. In the final days, Confederate generals Gideon Pillow and John B. Floyd fled the scene, abandoning 13,000 soldiers. When Confederate officers requested surrender terms, Grant famously responded that only unconditional and immediate surrender would be accepted, a stance that earned him the moniker Unconditional Surrender. Grant. Combined with the earlier capture of Fort Henry, this victory opened a gateway into the heart of Tennessee and elevated Grant's national prominence, setting him on the path to command the entire Union Army. Antietam, Sharpsburg, September 17, 1862. General Robert E. Lee launched his first major invasion of the North, leading the Army of Northern Virginia into Maryland. His goal: deliver a psychological blow to the Union, win foreign recognition for the Confederacy, and perhaps force the North to the negotiating table. President Abraham Lincoln dispatched Major General George B. McClellan and the Army of the Potomac to intercept Lee's advance. Their forces met near the town of Sharpsburg, where the battle opened at dawn in a cornfield choked with smoke and confusion. The brutal fighting shifted to landmarks like the Sunken Road, later dubbed Bloody Lane, and a stone bridge spanning Antietam Creek. Union soldiers had to charge the bridge 3 times before dislodging entrenched Confederates. By day's end, approximately 22,717 soldiers were killed, wounded, captured, or unaccounted for, making it the bloodiest single day in American military history. While tactically inconclusive, Lee's retreat back to Virginia gave Lincoln the leverage he needed to issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, transforming the war from a political struggle over secession into a moral crusade against slavery. Meanwhile, grim photographs taken by Alexander Gardner exposed the Northern public to the stark realities of war. Chancellorsville, May 1–6, 1863. In a bold display of battlefield brilliance, Lee secured one of his most impressive victories at Chancellorsville, despite facing a Union force more than twice the size of his own. With masterful audacity, he split his army and sent General Stonewall Jackson on a daring flanking maneuver through dense wilderness to strike the right flank of General Joseph Hooker's Union forces. The surprise attack sent the Union line reeling. Though outnumbered, Confederate forces pressed the advantage and drove Hooker's army into retreat. The cost, however, was devastating. Jackson was mistakenly shot by his own men and died from pneumonia brought on by his wounds 4 days later. Lee had won the battle, but lost one of his most trusted and capable commanders. Union casualties exceeded 17,000, while Confederate losses approached 13,000. Chancellorsville demonstrated Lee's tactical genius, but it also emboldened him to attempt another invasion of the North. Vicksburg, May 18th to July 4th, 1863. Strategically perched atop a bluff overlooking a bend in the Mississippi River, Vicksburg was vital to Confederate logistics. Jefferson Davis referred to it as the nailhead that holds the South's 2 halves together. Grant recognized that its capture would give the Union control of the Mississippi River and effectively sever the Confederacy. After several failed frontal assaults, Grant settled into a siege that wore down both soldiers and civilians. Confederate troops and townspeople alike were reduced to living in caves and subsisting on minimal rations as Union artillery and gunboats pounded the city. In June, a daring mining operation blew a crater under the Confederate lines, but Union troops failed to capitalize on the breach. By early July, Confederate Lieutenant General John C. Pemberton and his 29,000 troops, unable to endure further starvation and shelling, surrendered. The fall of Vicksburg, coinciding with the Union victory at Gettysburg, marked a turning point in the war and dealt a devastating blow to Confederate hopes. Gettysburg, July 1–3, 1863. In one of the most momentous battles in American history, Lee once again led his forces northward, hoping to strike a decisive blow on Union soil. His army, hungry and weary from war-ravaged Virginia, clashed with Union forces under Major General George Meade near the quiet town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. What began as a chance encounter on July 1st quickly escalated into a massive 3-day engagement. Confederate forces pushed Union troops through the town, but were unable to break their defensive positions on the surrounding high ground. On the 3rd day, Lee ordered a frontal assault on the center of the Union line at Cemetery Ridge. Led by General George Pickett, the infamous charge ended in disaster, with over 60% of the attacking Confederates killed or wounded. Lee was forced to retreat, ending his second and final invasion of the North. Gettysburg proved to be a major turning point, the Confederate Army would never again regain the strategic initiative, and the war began to tilt irreversibly in the Union's favor. Atlanta, July 22 to September 1, 1864. In the closing chapters of the war, Union General William Tecumseh Sherman directed a campaign deep into the heart of Georgia. A trio of Union armies converged on Atlanta, a crucial manufacturing and railway center. The Confederates, under General John Bell Hood, who had lost a leg at Chickamauga, launched a desperate counterattack outside the city but were repelled with heavy losses. The Battle of Atlanta stands as the most harrowing and devastating chapter of General William Tecumseh Sherman's relentless march to the sea, a campaign that carved a path of destruction through the heart of the Confederacy. This brutal confrontation, fought on July 22, 1864, exacted a staggering toll, with the Union suffering approximately 3,700 casualties, soldiers killed, wounded, or missing, while the Confederate forces endured an even heavier loss of around 5,500 men, their ranks decimated under the relentless pressure of Union assaults. Sherman, a master of strategic attrition, encircled Atlanta in a protracted siege throughout August, methodically severing its supply lines, disrupting communication, and strangling the city's ability to sustain itself as a vital Confederate stronghold. His forces bombarded key infrastructure, including railroads and warehouses, while skirmishes flared along the city's defenses, plunging Atlanta into a state of desperation. Civilians and soldiers alike faced dwindling resources, with food and ammunition shortages compounding the chaos. This siege not only crippled Atlanta's operational capacity but also shattered its morale, paving the way for its eventual fall and marking a pivotal turning point in the Civil War, as Sherman's campaign demonstrated the Union's unyielding resolve to crush the rebellion. On the first day of September 1864, General John Bell Hood, facing insurmountable pressure, ordered the Confederate forces to withdraw from Atlanta, leaving the city vulnerable. Union troops, under the command of General William Tecumseh Sherman, swiftly moved in, seizing control of the strategically vital hub. This triumph delivered a devastating setback to the Confederate cause, crippling their logistical and industrial capabilities, as Atlanta had served as a critical rail and supply center for the South. The loss reverberated through the Southern ranks, sapping morale and undermining their resolve to continue the fight. Conversely, the capture of Atlanta ignited a surge of optimism across the North, revitalizing public support for the Union's war effort at a time when war weariness had begun to take hold. The victory proved to be a pivotal moment, significantly bolstering President Abraham Lincoln's campaign for re-election in November 1864. By securing Atlanta, the Union not only gained a symbolic and tactical advantage but also sent a powerful message of resolve, ensuring that Lincoln's leadership would carry the nation through to a resolute and uncompromising conclusion of the Civil War. This turning point, marked by the fall of a city that had been a linchpin of Confederate resistance, underscored the relentless momentum of the Union forces and foreshadowed the ultimate collapse of the Southern Rebellion.